And Dad claimed my 600K house wasn't really mine until he saw the deed with only my signature. My name is Grace, and I'm 58 years old. 3 months ago, I bought the biggest and most beautiful thing I've ever owned, a fully paid off $600,000 home sitting on a quiet tree-lined street with a wraparound porch, a view of the hills, and enough sunlight to warm every room in the morning. I worked my entire adult life to afford something like this. As a senior project accountant, I spent decades pulling double shifts, managing multi-million-dollar budgets, and pinch penny saving when everyone else around me lived fast and loose. I never thought I'd have something this nice, something that was purely mine. No joint mortgage, no debt, no shared investment. Just my home, bought with my hard-earned money. But the moment my father stepped through the front door, I felt the old chill I remembered from childhood wrap around me again. I grew up in a tense, unstable household where entitlement was treated like tradition. My father believed the world owed him something, and since the world never delivered, he believed I owed him instead. I was the eldest of 3 children, and apparently that meant I was the designated caretaker, problem solver, and emotional sponge. My siblings both struggled financially, but I managed to fight my way into a career, something my father never quite forgave me for. Success in his eyes wasn't something earned. It was something that made you selfish. So when I invited him to see my new home, out of politeness, not excitement, I should have expected trouble. The moment he stepped inside, he didn't compliment the high ceilings or the fresh paint. He didn't acknowledge the years of sacrifice that led me here. Instead, he swept his eyes across the living room and muttered, "Well, family property should stay in the family." I froze. "Family property?" I repeated, unsure if he was joking. He shrugged like it was obvious. "You wouldn't have gotten anywhere in life without my support. So this house, technically, isn't yours alone. You children should share it. We all should." I stared at him, stunned. "I paid every penny of this house myself." He waved a dismissive hand. "Money isn't the only form of contribution. You grew up under my roof, didn't you? You were fed, clothed, taken care of. All that adds up. You succeeded because of me, so I should benefit." There it was. The entitlement I thought age might have mellowed. Instead, it had calcified. My voice stayed calm, though my stomach twisted. "Dad, that's not how anything works. I bought this house. It's mine." His face tightened. For a moment he just looked at me, and the disappointment in his eyes wasn't from misunderstanding. It was from not getting his way. "You owe me, Grace. You owe the family. Don't forget that." I felt myself slipping back into old habits, trying to soothe, trying to maintain peace, trying to keep the conversation from exploding. But beneath my polite responses, I sensed something dark shifting. He wasn't just being dramatic. He was planning something. Over the next few days, whispers started making their way back to me. A cousin called, confused, asking how I planned to divide the house between everyone. My sister messaged me saying Dad told half the relatives that we each had a share in my property now. My phone buzzed with people, congratulating the family on acquiring a 600K asset. I felt like I was living underwater. Everything too slow, too surreal. I confronted my father over the phone. "What are you telling people?" He didn't even hide it. "I'm telling them the truth. The house belongs to the family, not just you. Don't make this more difficult than it has to be." Difficult. As if I was the problem. As if buying a home wasn't an achievement, but a betrayal. Then, on a Friday afternoon after work, I received the message that made my stomach drop. It was from an unknown number. "Your father asked me to contact you. We need to discuss property rights regarding the home." Property rights. The words made my hands go cold. I read the text 3 times, trying to find a way it might mean something else. But it didn't. My father wasn't just talking. He wasn't just guilt-tripping. He wasn't just spreading stories. He was preparing a legal move. After 10 minutes of pacing and debating whether to ignore it, I finally called the number. My voice shook slightly, but I forced myself to stay steady as the call rang. A man picked up after 2 rings. His voice was low, professional. Before I could say anything, he spoke first. "Your father wants to discuss property rights." And everything inside me dropped into silence. I never imagined I'd be sitting across from a lawyer because my own father wanted a piece of my home. When I woke up the morning of the meeting, I honestly hoped it was all a misunderstanding. That the man I spoke with on the phone wasn't a lawyer, or maybe he'd confused me with someone else. I even hoped, foolishly, that my father would call and say he'd gone too far, that he didn't mean any of it. But by the time I parked in front of the small brick law office across town, the reality settled like a stone in my stomach. I was about to sit in a conference room with a stranger because my own father wanted to question my ownership of the home I built my life to afford. The waiting room smelled faintly of furniture polish and old paper. Diplomas lined the wall, and a framed photo of the attorney shaking hands with some local politician hung crookedly, like even it didn't want to be here. When a secretary ushered me back, my pulse quickened. I felt ridiculous, like a child called to the principal's office, but I forced myself to walk in with my head high. The man from the phone, Attorney Claremont, was already seated at the table. He looked like a tired accountant. Thin glasses, gray hair, a suit that had seen better days. He gave me a polite nod. "Ms. Saunders," he said, "thank you for coming on such short notice." I sat across from him, clutching my purse tighter than necessary. "I'm here because you said my father contacted you about property rights?" "Yes," he said, opening a file folder. "Your father, Mr. Saunders, retained me to discuss what he believes is a dispute over the ownership of your residence." A dispute. That word made my jaw clench. He continued, adjusting his glasses. "Your father claims the house was purchased with what he refers to as family contributions. Therefore, he believes he holds a partial interest in the property." My mouth fell open slightly. "Family contributions? What does that even mean?" "He stated," the lawyer said, flipping through the paperwork, "that your success, and therefore the funds used to acquire the house, were made possible through years of material and emotional support provided by him. He believes that entitles him to a share." I almost laughed, but the weight of the moment strangled the humor. "So he's saying he owns part of my home because he raised me? That's his argument?" The lawyer gave a small, uncomfortable shrug. "That is the essence of his claim." I exhaled slowly. "Well, then let me clarify something. I bought my home outright. I used my savings from decades of work, plus some inheritance from my late husband. My father didn't contribute a cent. Not one loan, not one gift, not one investment." "I understand," he said, tapping a pen against the file. "Your father has not provided any written documentation to support his claim, but he insists there were verbal agreements." I stared at him. "Verbal agreements about what?" He glanced at his notes. "He says you promised he could retire in the home, that you agreed long ago he would have a place to live when he became older. Therefore, he views the purchase of this home as fulfilling that promise." My stomach turned. "I never said that. Never." "I'm not saying you did," the lawyer replied. "I'm only relaying what he claims." Anger simmered beneath my ribs, but I kept my voice level. "My father has always believed the world owes him, but claiming verbal contracts about a home he didn't buy, that's delusional." Attorney Claremont sighed quietly, as if this wasn't the first family disaster he'd had to mediate. "Ms. Saunders, I want to be transparent. From what I can see so far, your father has no legal basis. There is no documented contribution, no co-ownership, no shared mortgage, no written agreement. Without evidence, his case is extremely weak." The tension in my shoulders loosened a little, but only a little. "But," he added, raising a... "he is persistent, and very insistent." I rolled my eyes before I could stop myself. Persistent was one word for him. He closed the file. "Frankly, this appears to be a family dispute he is trying to elevate to a legal issue. Many attorneys would refuse such a case." I tried to talk him down from it. "And?" I asked quietly. He wouldn't listen. There it was. The truth I already knew. When my father wanted something, reasoning didn't matter. Logic didn't matter. Fairness definitely didn't matter. As I stood to leave, the lawyer's eyes softened with something like pity. "Ms. Saunders, you should prepare yourself. I don't think your father intends to drop this." "I figured as much," I said, forcing a thin smile. "But thank you for explaining everything." I walked out to the parking lot feeling hollow. My father wasn't just entitled, he was determined. Determined to twist reality, determined to take what wasn't his, determined to rewrite history into something that benefited him, and he was willing to drag me into court to do it. I opened my car door, paused, and looked back at the office. What is my next legal step? I whispered to myself. Before I could start the engine, my phone buzzed. A new message from Attorney Claremont. "One more thing. Your father has already filed a request to freeze the property until a hearing." My breath stopped. Learning my father tried to freeze my property felt like betrayal sharpened into a weapon. The moment I read that message, from the same lawyer who tried to talk sense into my father, my pulse slammed against my ribs. I sat there in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened, feeling a kind of betrayal so sharp it almost didn't feel real. To file a request to freeze my home, my sanctuary, the place I'd built after years of scraping and rebuilding my life, that wasn't just entitlement anymore. That was aggression. That was war. I needed advice, real advice, from someone I trusted. So I called my attorney friend, Marlene, a woman who had gotten me out of more than one legal tangle in my younger years. The moment she picked up and heard the tension in my voice, grew quiet. What happened, Grace? Start from the beginning. I told her everything. The meeting with Attorney Claremont, the delusional claims my father made, and now this latest escalation. She sighed deeply when I finished. He has absolutely no grounds, she said firmly. But the request to freeze your property is a tactic. He's trying to scare you, pressure you. You need to gather everything, every document, every receipt, all proof of the purchase. Be ready to shut this down fast. Hearing her calm voice steadied me. I'll start tonight. Good. And Grace? Set boundaries. You should have set them years ago. Her words hit a bruise that had been forming for decades. That evening I pulled out my safe box and spread everything across the dining table. The closing documents, the cashier's checks, the bank statements showing every transfer from my savings and the inheritance from my late husband. As I sorted the papers, another memory surfaced. Unbidden, unwelcome. I saw myself at 22, standing in the doorway of my first apartment, excited to show my father the tiny space I'd worked so hard to afford. He looked around with a smirk and said, I raised you. Everything you earn is because of me. Don't forget that. At the time, I'd laughed it off, too afraid to challenge him. But even then, he was planting the seeds of a story he'd eventually come to fully believe. Another memory followed. My promotion to senior accountant 15 years ago. While everyone at the office celebrated, my father told me I only got the job because he taught me discipline. I spent years trying to prove myself, trying to outrun his belittling. It never worked. I finally sat back in my chair, staring at the piles of paperwork, and whispered to myself, I'm done letting him twist my life around him. I'm done. I needed to protect myself, not just emotionally, but practically. So I called my sister Rowan. She answered on the second ring, sounding wary. Are you okay? Dad's been talking. That's why I'm calling, I said bluntly. Is it true he's telling everyone he co-owns my home? Rowan sighed. Grace, he's telling cousins, neighbors, everyone. He said you agreed he could live there forever. People think you changed the deed behind his back. My breath hitched. I can't believe he's spreading that. I'm sorry, she whispered. I don't agree with him. I just don't know how to stop him. Her helplessness only fueled my resolve. I'll handle it. But thank you for being honest. After we hung up, I knew what I had to do next. I changed all the locks, every door, even the garage. I ordered 2 security cameras online, then drove to a hardware store because waiting 2 days wasn't fast enough. I installed them myself, drilling into the siding with trembling hands, but steady determination. No one, especially my father, would walk into my home uninvited. Then I drafted a formal letter with Marlene's guidance, stating clearly and confidently that my father's claims were false, unsupported, and bordering on harassment. It felt strange writing something so cold and official about the man who raised me, but I forced myself through every line. This wasn't about emotion anymore. This was about protecting myself. I had just finished sealing the envelope when my phone buzzed. It was a message from my neighbor, Mrs. Dalton. Hi, Grace. I thought you were at work earlier, but I saw your father walking around your yard this afternoon. Everything okay? A chill crawled down my spine. I called her immediately, asking what she saw. He walked around slowly, she said. Checked the side gate. I think he even tried to look through one of your windows. I didn't want to confront him, but it worried me. My throat tightened. Thank you for telling me. After we hung up, I marched to the living room and opened the security app. Even though the cameras were new, they'd been recording all afternoon. I clicked the first video. There he was, my father, walking through my yard, trying the windows, checking the back door, testing the handle twice. The breath left my body in one long, broken exhale. Seeing my own father test my windows like a burglar hollowed something inside me. When I replayed the footage for the third time, my body felt numb. I wasn't watching some stranger creeping around my house. I was watching my own father, moving slow, deliberate, testing doors and windows as if he had every right to walk inside. A part of me wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation, but innocence didn't jostle doorknobs. Innocence didn't lurk near a person's back door. Innocence didn't align with a man who had just tried to freeze my property. I waited until the next morning to call him, because I knew if I did it the night before, anger would have driven every word. When he answered, his tone was casual, almost cheerful. Hey, Gracie, everything all right? I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. Dad, I saw the security footage. You were at my house yesterday. Why? A pause. Then he exhaled impatiently. I was just checking the place, making sure everything looked good. Someone has to look after the house. Someone, I repeated sharply. It's my home, and you were trying the windows. Oh, don't be dramatic, he scoffed. I wasn't trying the windows. I was seeing if they were secure. You're a single woman living alone in a big house. You should be grateful someone cares. The condescension was almost worse than the lies. You didn't call. You didn't ask. You just showed up and treated my home like you had a right to it. His voice shifted, growing harder, colder. Grace, that house is too big for one woman. It's meant for family. You can't expect everyone to stand by while you hoard something that should be shared. There it was again, that twisted justification he clung to like scripture. I'm not hoarding anything, I said, forcing calm. I bought it. I paid for it, alone. He made a dismissive noise. Everything you have is because of family. You wouldn't have a career, a life, anything without me. I just want what's fair. Fair. In his mind, fairness was whatever benefited him. After we hung up, I felt sick, physically sick. My heart raced, my hands trembled, and a heaviness settled in my chest. I tried to shake it off, but the day only got worse. By noon, 2 cousins and an aunt had called me, each repeating some version of what my father had clearly fed them. Why can't you let him have a room in the house? You know he sacrificed a lot for you. Sharing the property is the right thing to do. He told us you promised he could retire there. I listened, stunned and silent, until I finally realized something important. He wasn't confused. He wasn't mistaken. He was manipulating them, intentionally, strategically, to isolate me and make me look like the ungrateful villain. I ended each call quickly, unable to stomach the pressure. By evening, I felt more alone than I had in years. I scheduled a meeting with my attorney, Marlene, who listened carefully as I explained everything, including the new harassment from relatives. When I showed her the footage, her eyebrows shot up. That's not someone checking on the house, she said firmly. That's someone assessing access points. Hearing those words made my skin crawl. She continued, here's the good news. He has no legal basis. You're the sole owner. And this footage, if necessary, it could be used to establish unwanted trespassing behavior. But for now, stay calm. Follow the process. The process, I muttered. I'm so tired of having to clean up after his chaos. I know, she said gently, but you're doing the right thing by standing your ground. Later that night, I got a voicemail from my father. His voice was soft, trembling, too emotional to be real. Grace, I'm sorry. Maybe I pushed too hard. I didn't mean to upset you. I just want us to be close again. Call me back, okay? I listened twice. The first time, guilt flickered briefly. The second time, I heard the calculation beneath the words. It was the same tone he used when he needed money years ago, when he pretended to be humble just long enough to get what he wanted. I didn't call back. The stress was beginning to show in my body. My sleep grew restless. Food tasted like dust. My shoulders locked into constant tension. Some mornings I woke up already exhausted. Some nights I cried without meaning to. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was the realization that my father had never truly seen me as a daughter, only as a resource. 3 days later, I came home from work to a thick envelope in my mailbox with a government seal in the corner. My heartbeat quickened as I tore it open. Inside was an official notice. A hearing had been scheduled. A date. A courtroom. A judge. It was real now. Walking into the courthouse, I felt like I was carrying every year of emotional labor my father never... The courthouse steps felt heavier than stone as I climbed them. The morning air was cool, but my palms were damp, and my heart beat with a tight, steady pressure against my ribs. This wasn't just a legal hearing. This was decades of unresolved wounds becoming official, stamped, and filed. But even through the anxiety humming beneath my skin, I forced myself forward. I would not let fear make me small. Not today. Inside the courtroom, the air smelled faintly of disinfectant and old carpet. Rows of benches stretched behind me, but when I stepped inside, only a handful of people sat near the back. It took me a second to recognize my cousins, an aunt, even my younger brother, all gathered behind the plaintiff's table, my father's side. My stomach tightened. Across the room, my father stood near his attorney, his posture tall, confident, almost smug. He wore a suit I'd never seen before, one he must have bought just for this performance. When he noticed me, he didn't smile. He just lifted his chin as if this moment confirmed some victory. I took my seat beside Marlene, who gave me a reassuring nod. Deep breath, she whispered. Just tell the truth. You're on solid ground. I tried to believe her. When the judge entered, everyone rose. He was a stern-looking man with silver hair and an expression that revealed nothing. As soon as we were seated again, My father's attorney launched into their case. Your Honor, he began, Mr. Saunders is here today to clarify his partial interest in the property currently held in his daughter's name. He asserts that the home was purchased with significant contributions provided by him throughout her upbringing, including funding her education and supporting her financially for years. I almost choked. Funding my education? Supporting me financially? My father had done neither. I'd paid my own tuition with scholarships, part-time work, and student loans, but he stood beside his attorney, nodding solemnly, as if he were describing historical fact. My father even dabbed the corner of one eye dramatically, and a few of my relatives murmured sympathetically. I stared at him, stunned at how easily he stepped into the role of the humble, selfless provider. The judge turned to me. Ms. Saunders, do you have a response? Yes, Your Honor, I said, steadying my voice. I have extensive documentation disproving every financial claim made. I opened the binder Marlene helped me organize and walked through each tab, handing up copies to the clerk. Receipts of my tuition payments, bank statements from the years I worked double shifts, old tax forms showing I claimed myself independently from the age of 19, employment records, savings statements, transfer logs, every piece of my financial life laid bare. As I spoke, my father's face tightened. Gone was the smug confidence. In its place grew a slow, simmering anger. But it got worse. His attorney stood again. Mr. Saunders also asserts there was a verbal agreement. His daughter promised he could retire in the home. Promises, Your Honor, form implied contracts. My father nodded vigorously. She said it for years. I took care of her, she'd take care of me. That's what families do. I turned toward the judge. Your Honor, I never made such a promise. Never. My father has said similar things since I was young, claiming my future successes owed him something, but I never agreed to any arrangement, verbally or otherwise. This house was purchased solely by me, contributed nothing. My voice wavered only once, but I forced myself to keep going. I paid for the entire home with my savings and an inheritance from my late husband. I have every receipt, every document, and every closing record here. Behind my father, I heard one cousin whisper, Wait, inheritance? Another relative shifted uncomfortably, clearly beginning to doubt the narrative they'd been sold. The judge leaned back, studying the paperwork, then looking at my father with an expression I couldn't quite read, some mix of skepticism and restraint. Mr. Saunders, the judge asked, do you have any documentation, bank records, canceled checks, transfers, anything at all showing you contributed financially to the purchase? My father swallowed hard. No, but it was a family agreement. These things don't need paperwork. She knows what she promised. The judge didn't respond immediately. Finally, he spoke clearly. Given the conflicting statements and absence of written agreements, I will need to review the property deed itself before making further determination. My heart jolted. The judge continued, Ms. Saunders, please provide the original deed for verification. I expected at the next hearing date. I nodded automatically, but adrenaline spiked through me. I knew exactly where it was. In my safe at home. But the judge wanted it soon. Very soon. As the judge dismissed the room for a brief recess, I felt my breath catch. I needed that deed. Immediately. Holding the deed in my hands reminded me. I built this life myself, piece by piece. The first thing I did after leaving the courthouse was drive straight home. I didn't even take off my shoes when I walked inside. I went directly to the hallway closet, opened the safe hidden beneath a stack of blankets, and keyed in the code with trembling fingers. When the lock clicked open, I felt something almost like relief wash through me. Inside, exactly where I'd left it, was the clean white folder containing the original deed to my home. I pulled it out and carried it to the dining table as if it were something fragile, something breakable. I sat down, opened the folder, and stared at the heavy paper. My name, Grace Saunders, was printed clearly in bold ink, and beneath that, only one signature. Mine, no co-owner, no witness claiming equity, no fine print that could be twisted into a shared claim. Just me. Holding that deed between my hands, I felt a swelling of emotion that hit deeper than pride. It was proof, physical, undeniable proof, of everything I had survived to reach this point. The late nights managing budgets, the years after my husband died, when paying bills and maintaining the home we once shared had nearly broken me. The loneliness of rebuilding myself piece by piece, and finally, the moment I'd signed this deed, taking ownership of something I worked my whole life to achieve. This house wasn't just property. It was stability, and it was mine. I took a deep breath, slid the deed back into a protective sleeve, and placed it next to my case documents. Tomorrow, Marlene and I would scan everything, organize the exhibits, and submit copies to the court. My father could claim whatever fantasy he wanted, but the truth was written in black ink on legal paper. Just as I stacked the documents neatly, my phone rang. It was my sister, Rowan. "Grace," she said immediately, her voice low and tight. "Dad's panicking." I closed my eyes for a beat. Panicking how? "He's telling anyone who will listen that you're trying to take everything away from him. He's furious you didn't agree to the arrangement. He keeps saying you're going to leave him destitute." Destitute. The man had a pension, a monthly Social Security check, and a paid-off condo he refused to live in because it wasn't grand enough. But in his mind, he was a victim the second he didn't get his way. "What exactly is he saying to you?" I asked quietly. Rowan hesitated. "He said if you don't let him move in, or give him part of the house, he's going to cut you off." I actually laughed, a small humorless sound. "Cut me off from what? He hasn't supported me since I was a kid. He has nothing to cut me off from." "I know," she whispered, but he said it like it was some kind of ultimatum. "He can make all the ultimatums he wants," I said firmly. "I'm not giving him my home." There was silence. Then she sighed. "I wish he'd stop dragging everyone into this." But he didn't stop. The rest of that day, I received texts and calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in weeks. They used guilt, pity, obligation, even scripture. Anything they thought might weaken me just enough to back down. Family homes belong to family. Your father needs somewhere to feel safe. You know he raised you. You owe him. Owe him. That word had been my chain for decades, but not anymore. By the time I silenced my phone, my hands were shaking again, this time with anger, not fear. Manipulation had always been his weapon, and now he'd turned the entire family into ammunition. Around 8 that evening, a new message appeared, this time an email from the court's automated system. I clicked it open. The subject line made my pulse spike. Additional supporting documents submitted by plaintiff. My father had uploaded something. I clicked the attachment. A PDF loaded on the screen. At first glance, it looked like a typed agreement, formatted clumsily, with uneven spacing and mismatched fonts. But when I zoomed in, my breath caught. The title read, Family Property Agreement, 2016. My eyes raced down the page. There were statements claiming I had verbally committed to sharing any future home with my father, claims that he had financially supported me well into adulthood, and at the bottom, my name, typed next to a messy, obviously copied and pasted image of a signature. My signature. Except I had never signed anything like this. My skin went cold. My fingers trembled as I scrolled. The date was wrong. The formatting was wrong. The wording didn't even sound like me. It wasn't just fabricated. It was forged. I stared at the fake signature, my stomach twisting tighter and tighter, until a single thought rose above the sickening swirl of betrayal. He was willing to forge a legal document to take my home. The moment I saw the forged document, something inside me snapped into clarity. I stared at the forged agreement until my eyes blurred, the words swimming on the screen like oil on water. It wasn't just a lie, it was strategy, intentional, crafted, meant to deceive. My father hadn't stumbled into exaggeration or confusion. He had made a calculated attempt to rewrite history in his favor. And seeing that fake signature, an imitation of my name, slapped onto a document I never touched, ignited something in me that had been building for years. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was furious, and I was done being cornered by his manipulation. The next morning, I took my laptop and the printed copy of the forged document to Marlene's office. She took one look at the signature and let out a humorless exhale. "Oh, he's desperate," she muttered, "and incredibly sloppy." She spread the pages across her desk, pulling out a ruler, magnifier, and 2 sample documents with my legitimate signature. "Look here," she said, tapping the bottom of the page. "Your signature on the deed has a natural slant. Here, on this alleged agreement, the angle is inconsistent. It looks like it was cut out and rotated digitally." I leaned in. She was right. The edges were pixelated, like someone had copied it from a scan and pasted it onto the PDF. "And here," she continued, pointing to a misspelled word in the text. "Supportive is spelled wrong, twice. A court wouldn't draft anything with typos like that. And the spacing, completely irregular." She flipped to the second page. "Also, notice this. The date is 6 years before you even began looking at property. So unless you have psychic abilities, you couldn't have agreed to share a home that didn't exist yet. The absurdity of it would have made me laugh if the situation weren't so cruel." I rubbed my forehead. So what do we do? We expose it, she said simply. You prepare a clear statement outlining the forgery, and I'll present the inconsistencies. The judge will see right through it. I nodded. For the rest of the afternoon, we drafted my statement. Carefully, precisely, factually. I wrote about the fabricated dates, the mismatched fonts, the counterfeit signature, and the absence of any memory or record of such an agreement. Every sentence felt like reclaiming something my father had tried to steal. My truth, my dignity, my autonomy. By the time the next hearing date arrived, I felt steadier. Nervous, yes, but grounded. And when I walked into the courtroom, I noticed something immediately. My father wasn't smug this time. He sat stiffly, shoulders hunched, eyes darting around like he couldn't settle on anything. His relatives were there too, though fewer than before. Several avoided eye contact with me. The judge entered, and everyone rose. Once seated, the proceedings resumed. Ms. Saunders, the judge said, you have additional evidence to submit? Yes, Your Honor, I replied, my voice strong. I do. I stepped forward with the real deed first, the document that proved beyond any question that the home was solely mine. The judge examined it closely. My father shifted in his seat, fidgeting with his tie. When the judge finished, Marlene handed over the next exhibit, the forged agreement. Your Honor, she said clearly, this document was submitted by the plaintiff. Upon review, we found multiple inconsistencies indicating it is not authentic. I read my prepared statement. As I spoke, I watched my father out of the corner of my eye. His face drained of color. He shifted again, swallowing hard, his knee bouncing anxiously under the table. By the time I finished, he looked like a man watching his sandcastle dissolve under a rising tide. The judge lifted the forged paper. Mr. Saunders, he said slowly, can you explain these discrepancies? My father straightened abruptly. I didn't forge anything. I was given that document years ago. Grace must have forgotten she signed it. I stepped forward. Your Honor, I never signed that. My signature was copied from a different document. The date doesn't align with reality, and the language doesn't match anything I would say. The judge turned back to my father. Do you have any evidence to support your claim that this document predates the deed? My father's mouth opened, but no words came out. He looked toward his relatives, seeking support maybe, but several were shaking their heads now, whispering. Some looked shocked, others looked embarrassed. The truth was unraveling around him. After several seconds of awkward silence, the judge sighed. This document is clearly not valid. I am formally dismissing it from evidence. I exhaled, feeling the weight lift from my chest. My father slumped, defeated, his attorney whispering frantically beside him. The judge shuffled the papers, then looked up, his expression firm. With most claims now dismissed and the exhibit challenges resolved, he said, I will now issue the final ruling. My entire body tensed. I held my breath as the judge began speaking, every muscle locked in place. The judge adjusted his glasses, glanced down at the documents one more time, and cleared his throat. The sound echoed in the silent courtroom, stretching the moment until my pulse thudded in my ears. For a second, all I could think about was how surreal it felt, standing in a room filled with my own family members, waiting for a legal declaration about a home I worked my entire life to earn. After reviewing all evidence, the judge began, his tone steady. Including financial records, ownership documentation, and the submitted exhibits, it is clear that the property in question belongs solely to Ms. Grace Saunders. Relief hit me so fast and hard that I swayed, catching the edge of the table to steady myself. The judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, he continued, his tone sharpening, I must address the fraudulent document provided by the plaintiff. Submitting false evidence to the court is a serious matter. Mr. Saunders, you are fortunate the defense is not pursuing additional charges. My father's face flushed a deep, blotchy red. He opened his mouth as if to argue, but the judge held up a hand. Enough. The home is 100% Ms. Saunders's property. All claims to the contrary are dismissed. Behind me, the benches shifted with murmurs. I didn't turn around, but I could hear the reactions. My aunt whispering in shock, a cousin sighing, someone else muttering. I knew something was off. Before today, most of them had sided with my father. They believed his stories, his exaggerations, his half-truths woven into melodramatic pleas. Now, confronted with legal reality, they fell silent, avoiding my eyes as if shame were contagious. My father, however, shoved back his chair and stood. This is ridiculous, he snapped. This whole thing is a lie. She's lying. She's always lied. The judge didn't even look up. "Mr. Saunders, you may leave now." My father scoffed loudly, one final theatrical flourish, then stormed out of the courtroom, his footsteps pounding like angry exclamation points. A few relatives hurried after him, calling his name, trying to soothe the tantrum he had no right to throw. I didn't chase after him. I didn't even watch him go. Instead, I let myself slowly exhale, the tension draining out of my shoulders like water pouring from a cracked bucket. A strange mix of emotions welled up inside me. Relief, yes, but also sorrow, so old and familiar it felt stitched into my bones. This man was my father, and yet he had turned my stability into his battleground. Marlene placed a steady hand on my arm. "You did beautifully," she said, "and you're officially done with this mess." I nodded, blinking back tears that weren't quite sadness and weren't quite joy, just the emotional fallout of surviving something I never should have had to survive. "Thank you," I whispered, "for everything." We walked out together into the hallway. The sunlight streaming through the tall windows felt brighter, cleaner, like the world had shifted just a little. As we stepped outside onto the courthouse steps, several relatives lingered awkwardly, clearly waiting for me. My first instinct was to brace for more guilt, more pressure, more accusations. But instead, the apologies started. "I'm sorry, Grace. I didn't know." He made it sound so convincing. "We shouldn't have taken sides." Some kept their distance, offering only stiff nods or murmured excuses. Others wouldn't even meet my gaze, too embarrassed by their own willingness to believe him. I didn't offer forgiveness or anger. I simply said, "It's over now," and left it at that. I wasn't going to carry their guilt along with everything else. When I finally reached my car, I paused before unlocking it. For the first time in weeks, my chest felt open. I could breathe, I could think, I could go home without wondering who would be lurking around my yard, peering through my windows, or plotting behind my back. Home? That word had never meant more. When I walked through my front door, the quiet inside greeted me like a warm, steady embrace. I set down my purse, traced my fingers along the kitchen counter, and let myself simply exist in the space I fought so hard to protect. I wasn't just safe, I was free. Hours later, as dusk dimmed the windows, my phone buzzed on the table. I nearly ignored it, but when I glanced at the screen, I froze. Voicemail from Dad. My stomach tightened before I even pressed play. His voice came through soft, trembling, dripping with regret that felt too convenient to be genuine. "Grace, sweetheart, I know things got out of hand, but you're my daughter. We're family. I shouldn't have to beg, but please, can you still let me live in the house with you? Just one room. That's all I need." I stood there in the fading light, the words echoing through the kitchen. Hearing my father beg for a place in the home he tried to steal was a moment I never expected. When the voicemail ended, I stood there for a long while, the silence of my kitchen thick and unmoving. His words replayed in my mind, soft, pleading, drenched in a fragile tremor that anyone else might have mistaken for sincerity. But I heard the undertone beneath it. It wasn't regret. It wasn't love. It was desperation born from losing control. A last attempt to wedge himself back into my life, even after trying to take so much from me. I pressed the phone against the counter and let out a long exhale. For a brief moment, guilt tugged at me. That old, familiar guilt I'd been conditioned to feel since childhood. The guilt that whispered I should take care of him, excuse him, make myself small to ease his discomfort. But then another memory rose in its place. The forged document, his lies in court, relatives calling me selfish because they believed him, the way he tried to pry open my windows, the way he tried to freeze the deed to my home. Compassion was one thing, self-destruction was another, and allowing him into my home, my sanctuary, wouldn't just be a mistake. It would be an invitation for the cycle to start again, one that I knew from experience would consume me piece by piece. I replayed the voicemail once more, listening not for what he said, but for what he didn't. There was no real apology, no acknowledgement of the pain he caused, no willingness to change, just a plea for shelter without accountability. And that was all the clarity I needed. I picked up my phone, opened a new message, and typed slowly, deliberately, "I will not be allowing you to live with me. I need distance. Please do not contact me again unless it is truly necessary." I stared at the words before hitting send. My hand trembled a little, but not from fear, from liberation. A minute later, I blocked his number. My breath steadied. My chest felt lighter than it had in months, Later that evening, I called my sister Rowan. When she picked up, I told her everything about the voicemail, his request, and my decision. "Good," she said softly. "Grace, you have every right to protect yourself. Dad has made his choices. Now you're making yours." Her support washed over me like warm sunlight. For so long, I'd felt alone in this. Hearing her validate my boundary reminded me that I didn't need universal approval to make healthy decisions. I only needed my own permission. Over the next few weeks, something unexpected happened. The house, my house, began to feel different, lighter, warmer. I woke up each morning without the knot in my stomach that had become routine. I moved through the rooms with a new sense of peace, like the air itself had cleared. I cooked breakfast with music playing softly. I opened windows without fear of anyone trying to pry them open from the outside. I returned from work knowing the only footsteps that crossed my porch were my own. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe. And as the days passed, I reflected on everything that had led me here. How many years I'd spent believing my worth was tied to pleasing others. How often I'd shrunk myself so someone else, especially my father, could feel big. How long I'd confused loyalty with obligation, compassion with submission. But standing in my home now, I saw the truth with a clarity I should have had years ago. Independence isn't disloyalty. Boundaries aren't cruelty. And self-worth isn't arrogance. It's survival. I wasn't shutting my father out to punish him. I was protecting myself from a lifetime of patterns he refused to break. And in doing so, I was finally valuing myself in a way he never had. I didn't cut myself off from the whole family. Instead, I rebuilt carefully, piece by piece, choosing distance where I needed it and connection where it served my emotional well-being. Some relatives apologized. Others quietly drifted away. I accepted both outcomes with calm acceptance. Relationships didn't need to be dramatic or obligatory. They needed to be healthy. One evening, as I sat on my porch, watching the sun sink behind the hills, I realized how far I'd come. My home wasn't just a building anymore. It was a symbol of every boundary I set, every battle I fought, every inch of ground I reclaimed. It was the tangible result of a lifetime of perseverance, and it belonged to me, fully, indisputably, finally. As the last light faded and the porch grew dim, I stood, walked into my home, and gently closed the door behind me. Grace reclaims her life and closes the door, literally and metaphorically. In the end, I realized my home wasn't just a place. It was the proof of a lifetime spent rebuilding myself, alone when no one believed I could. My father tried to take that from me, but what he really tried to steal was my peace. And standing in the quiet of my living room, I finally understood that protecting my boundaries wasn't selfish. It was survival. I closed the door behind me, knowing it was the first time I'd truly chosen myself. But tell me, would you forgive someone who tried to take everything you spent your life earning? Stories like mine remind us that sometimes the biggest battles are the ones fought within our own families. And if hearing this helped you feel seen, understood, or a little less alone, then stay with this community. There are more stories waiting, stories that echo pieces of your own life. Your voice matters here, and sharing it helps others find the strength to tell theirs too.